Welcome back, everybody. It is a Fox 40 special report for you tonight. To a lot of people, she was a gentle old woman who cared for elderly and disabled people. And when I mention her name, it certainly will sound familiar to you. I'm talking about Dorothea Puente. She was not a gentle person. She was a calculated criminal who poisoned her tenants, her business partner, and eventually her fiancé.
And it's been 30 years since the convicted serial killer was caught here in Sacramento. And tonight's special report, Fox 40's Allie Wolf shows us never-before-seen pictures from the investigation.
And not just that, but also a closer look at the unanswered questions surrounding Dorothea Puente and why many believe that justice was never served.
Never judge a book by its cover.
Appearances can be deceiving.
Because the contents might be what you've never expected.
Mysteries hide beneath the surface at this charming Victorian in downtown Sacramento.
Flowers, vegetation, greenery, shrubs. It was like, wow, they're oases in a neighborhood. But actually, it was a hellhole.
This sweet-looking lady ran a boarding house here in the 80s. But Dorothea Puente is a convicted serial killer. She was accused of poisoning her business partner, her fiancé, and some of her tenants.
7 people buried in that side yard, huh? They all got down lane in them.
What we'd stumbled on was actually a graveyard at 1426 F Street, and it was Dorothea's graveyard of her victims.
She lured people into her life and preyed on them. But in November of 1988, her deception, her scheming came to an end when retired Sacramento police detective John Cabrera showed up at her home and pulled the first bones from her yard.
I look at the photographs and I feel bad for the victims. I feel bad and not knowing what they suffered or how much they really suffered.
Now, for the first time, Cabrera is publicly sharing the original photos from the investigation, capturing the long days he and his team spent digging in the yard at 1426 F Street. He showed us about 100 images. Most of them are gruesome and devastating, some too graphic to show. From the garden, which became a graveyard, to the homemade wooden coffin and the shovel used to dig up the remains. This collection of photos is a glimpse beyond the crime scene tape, the reality behind the facade on F Street.
You can see what the kitchen looked like. I mean, there's nothing inside the house that tells you, oh my gosh, I've stumbled on this whorehouse.
The boarding house looked like a pleasant and welcoming home.
This house of horrors had this facade.
Puente took in the sick, the weak, the vulnerable, tenants unable to get by on their own. She cashed their Social Security checks. Prosecutors later called those victims shadow people because they had no one. When they disappeared, no one noticed.
This was the room where she basically turned into her own morgue.
In 1982, Bill Clausen's mother, Ruth Monroe, died in Puente's house.
Mama's mom, you can never replace her.
She was her friend, her business partner, a healthy woman in her early 60s. After moving in with Dorothea, she quickly became sick, weak, and died. For Clausen, the loss is still painful.
It'll never go away.
Even with Puente caught, convicted, and dead, he is still fighting for his mother, trying to carry on her memory and undo the story Puente spun.
I want people to understand that she did not commit suicide. Okay? She was murdered, and she was murdered by Dorothea.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Dorothea Montalva Puente, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
30 years later, there are still questions about this unlikely killer, about who she really was, if she acted alone, and if there were more victims.
Are there more bodies?
I consider Dorothea an enigma.
Journalist Martin Coos hoped to answer some of those questions in 2008 during a series of interviews with Puente in prison.
She almost comes across as the kindliest predator.
After more than 12 hours of conversations,
She is, at heart, unknowable.
at the end of his final visit, he didn't hold back.
was asking her these more pointed questions and asking her how she felt to be known as a serial killer, to be known as someone who was reviled for what she had committed. And she looked me square in the eye and says, "I don't give a shit what anyone else thinks." And that was a moment where the room just suddenly felt still and cold.
Dorothea Puente maintained her innocence until the end.
You know what I'm talking about. I have never killed anybody.
Taking the truth with her to her grave in 2011. Long after her death, Clausen still feels no justice.
You know, she was an evil woman and she put up a front. She conned a lot of people.
Tonight, we're launching season 2 of our podcast series, Exposed, this time on Dorothea Puente. We take you inside this house, the notorious house on F Street, and also you'll hear much more from lead detective John Cabrera. He takes us through the details of the case and also the mysteries that still haunt him today. Exposed, The Shadow Keeper is available now. Ali Wolf, Fox 40 News.
And again, season 2 of Exposed is available now on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can also find the episodes on our website, fox40.com. There, you can also get more information about the case, plus a closer look at some of those never-before-seen photos from the investigation.